Today I want to talk to you about the fan belt. It's critical that the fan belt is tensioned properly. If it's too loose, the engine can overheat because the fan's not driven properly. If it's too tight, it's like anything else. Something's going to give, probably the bearings on the fan. Let's go through the procedure of how to check it, and let's find out if it needs to be adjusted or not. We're going to need some specifications, and we're going to need some tooling so that we can do it properly. So specification for deflection is 0.320 to 0.360 in old-fashioned inches, and that would be deflection. So in other words, the belt is where the belt is sitting now to where it deflects to. How far did it actually move? Now, I've made a tool for this that makes it quite simple because I do this all the time. And there we go. So this I'll show you the big tool, the whole tool in a second. This is a little file mark right here and another file mark right there. And in between here represents 0.340 thousandths of an inch. So I'm right in the middle of the adjustment specification. Now the rest of the tool looks like this. It's a wire, a reasonable thickness, not a coat hanger, something thicker. And this end here is where it goes over the belt, like so. And you might not be able to see in focus, but one of the marks lines up with the fan housing, and then when it's pulled, the other mark lines up with the fan housing. Now that's all great. I need to pull this with 10 pounds force. Well, I work with my hands all day, so I can pull things pretty hard. So what we need is, I have a calibrated little fish scale that I put an actual 10 pounds on and lifted with it and made sure that it read 10 pounds. Let me put it on mid-span, which is right there. In other words, half the distance from that to there halfway. And I'm starting at the mark right here, which is my start. It lines up with the fan housing. Then I'm going to pull it until my other mark lines up with the fan housing, which is right there. And I'm going to read the tension, and it says 8 pounds. So that is a little bit slack. So we're going to readjust that to make it correct so that it has the proper amount of deflection at 10 pounds. How do I adjust it? There's a series of shims in between the two halves of the fan, and what I need to do to make it the belt tension tighter is I need to make the two halves of the pulley behind the fan closer together. So I'll be removing a shim, and I'll show you that. Now, the fan is rather fragile. I don't know any way that you can do this without the right tool, without potentially breaking the fan. So here is the correct tool. It's actually not very expensive as far as Rotax tools goes, and you need it to do it. It has these 3 little fingers that go in. Now, the way that I do this is I put it in, and it's when I go to undo it or tighten it, it's pretty tight right there. So let's try it in a different spot and see. Well, it's still pretty tight right there. I want to keep the tool away from the blade. So let's get one more. Try that one. Oh, look at this. Okay. So either way that I'm going to go, I have good distance back here, and I have good distance from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my trusty little marker, and I'm going to mark it, and that's my reference. So when I go back to this, I'll always put my tool back in here so that I'm as far away from the fan as possible. So we'll take our, and of course, and it does that sometimes. And it was good that that was torqued properly. Apparently last time it was taken off. So off comes the nut, and the washer was on correctly, as it has an up to it, and that always goes against the nut instead of against the fan. So I usually rotate it so that the keyway is at the top so the key doesn't fall out. And I take the fan off, and this is what I was talking about. So we have as you can see, half the pulley here and half the pulley there, and look at all these little shims in the middle. So that's what needs to be how we do our adjustment. So we'll move the fan belt out of the way and just let it sit there. And these have a little notch in them that goes over the keyway, and I'll take one off. And they're in different thicknesses. So that one is 15 thousandths. And because I'm only looking for a couple of pounds, I'm not going to take off a really thick one. I want to take out as thin a one as I can get. So I'm going to take them all off and measure them. And I'm just using the vernier. So there's a 12, 10, 10, and a 10. Okay. All right. So now what I'm going to do is, there is a washer back here that's actually is a spacer. And there's another shim. And I want that guy because, come on. Oh, there goes the belt. All right, now. Oh, nice, okay. So this is a thinner one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to swap this out, and I'm going to put one of the ones in the back that's thicker, and I'm taking that thin one that was in storage there. So this is how they're to be stored. So we have the bearing, we have this thick one here, which is the spacer, and then any extra or unused shims go back there for storage. Well, somebody called me and said they saw a video where they had put the shim behind the nut, and of course I had to watch the video, and it chewed the shim all up because it's a shim, it's not a washer. So they're designed and intended to go back there. So there we go. So those guys are all back on. I fetched my belt from the floor. And now that that's as the keyway's at the top, it's a little easier to put on. There we go. So the keyway lined up with the key. This goes on. You can see the angle in it. Oops. You can see the angle in it there. It's going to go against the steel part. So in other words, it goes away from the fan. So we're going to put that on. We're going to put our nut back on. And now we're going to snug it up. And I'm going to have it turn while I do it, because of course it's pinching the two pulley halves in, so I don't want to just squish the belt in there. So as I snug it in, I'm going to turn the engine so that it doesn't catch the belt. The belt can ride out. Now, I can feel the difference in the tension on it right now. So now I'm going to go back to my reference mark, which was right there. And for now, in case I have to take this apart again, I'm just going to hand tighten it snugly. And now I have the proper deflection, and I have 10 pounds tension on the belt. That's exactly what I want. So now I will go ahead and torque up the nut to specifications. That's the way that I adjust the fan belt tension. It doesn't have to be real complicated. My little wire tool and my calibrated scale works quite nicely. If you do have to adjust it, don't fiddle with anything else except the proper tool. You will probably break the fan, and then you're in a real fix at that point in time. So remember, when you switch the shims, if you remove any shims from in between the pulley halves, then the shim that you take out has to stay with the engine, because you might need it when you put a new belt on later. And it has to go behind that furthest in pulley half. That's where they're stored. They're not stored underneath here as a washer because it's not a washer. It'll just smush the poor thing. It's just a little thin shim. In between the grooves where the belt rides, if there's rust in there, that rust in there, as soon as you start the engine up, it's just like sandpaper, and it just sands the side of the belt down, and the belt gets looser and looser. So if there's rust in there, maybe it needs a new pulley, maybe it needs a new belt too. But anyway, just be aware that if the pulleys are all rusted, there's no way the belt is going to stay tensioned. If this had rusty pulleys on it and I tension the belt now, it's not going to take too long before the belt's loose again. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate your time. Bye now.